Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to show you how to paint this Plaguebearer model, ideal for your games of Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40,000. So as you can see, the first thing I've done is I've primed the model black, as this will give us a nice smooth, even base coat for the rest of our colours to work from. And now I'm coming in with some Death Guard green, and I'm going to paint all over the skin to the model. This is going to take a couple of coats to get a full solid coverage across the model, but in a couple of thin layers slowly build up Death Guard green all over the skin. So we've got a solid base coat of Death Guard green. I'm using Death Guard green here on the Plaguebearer to give us that really good Nurgle rotted look all over the miniature. It's going to look fantastic when you've got a whole squad of these guys painted up on the battlefield. As you can see, after the first coat, still very patchy coverage, so I'm going back in with a second layer of Death Guard green, building it up till I get that solid layer all over the skin to the Plaguebearer. Just working a couple of thin layers on this so you don't obscure any of the detail on the skin. Just apply a couple of layers of Death Guard green till we get that solid coverage all over the skin to the model. And after a couple of layers, you can see I've got a solid base coat, Death Guard green, all over the skin. So the next step is I'm going to shade all of the skin. For this shade, I'm coming in with some Athonian camo shade, and I'm going to apply this all over the Death Guard green that we just applied. So you don't want this to pull too heavily in the recesses, but a little bit of pooling will just add some extra definition to certain areas of the model and really give it that rotten look. So don't worry about a little bit of pooling. Just ensure you apply a shade of Athonian camo shade all over the skin to the Plaguebearer. And after that shade has dried, you can see it's settled into all of the recesses and added definition all over the skin. So now it's time to start highlighting the skin. So for this I'll be coming in with Death Guard green again first, but now I'm going to dry brush this all over the model. By dry brushing it, we'll pick out all of the raised details, leaving some of that Athonian camo shade showing in all of the recesses. This dry brush is much quicker than going over the model and applying this layer by layer over all of the details. This is such a large area, it's so much quicker to just dry brush the Death Guard green over the model, help create that tonal difference, really add interest to the skin of the model. Just make sure you apply a dry brush of Death Guard green all over the model, picking out all of those raised surfaces with a dry brush of Death Guard green. And after that dry brush has been applied, you can see it's added definition all over the model, softened down some of those darker areas, and really highlighted some of the brighter parts of the skin. So I'm going to apply another dry brush to the skin. For that I'll be using Ogryn camo. So for this I want to do this much lighter than the dry brush of Death Guard green we just applied. I'm going to do this in vertical strokes from top to bottom, which will pick out all of the raised upwards facing surfaces, brightening them up just a little bit, while still leaving the previous layers visible underneath the Ogryn camo. So you can see I'm just focusing the top to bottom motion, just applying a light dry brush of Ogryn camo to pick out the most raised details as a final highlight on all of those most raised details and upwards facing surfaces. And after that dry brush of Ogryn camo, you can see it's added definition and highlights all over the skin and really brightened up those most raised points to the Plaguebearer. So now with some Bugman's Glow, I'm going to pick out some of the boils and details on the skin. There's all of these sort of raised lumps here on this one's belly. I'm going to pick these out with a layer of Bugman's Glow, being really careful around the skin we've already painted and highlighted. So I'm going to pick out all of the largest balls and some of the smaller ones on the model. You don't have to pick out every single one. Having some tonal difference is fine, but it's a good idea to pick out quite a few of the raised bumps and boils that are on the model, as well as any areas of exposed flesh where the skin's peeled away as well. In these areas, I'm going to apply Bugman's Glow into these wounded areas. This will add interest all over the model, as well as picking out these details and really give them that Nurgle, rotted, decaying flesh look. You can see here on areas like the back, I'm picking out some of those prominent boils just to break up that green colour we had all over the skin. So just picking out some of these and applying a little bit of Bugman's Glow to them to break up that colour and add some interest all over our Plaguebearer. And after picking out those areas with Bugman's Glow, you can see we've broken up that green colour, added interest all over the skin, and picked out some of the details. So now with some Abaddon Black, I'm going to pick out his sword first, covering all of this with a couple of layers of Abaddon Black, so I've got a nice solid black colour all over his sword. Obviously be really careful around areas of skin, don't want to get any of this black over the skin we've painted and highlighted. But I'm going to make sure I pick out all of the sword with a couple of layers of Abaddon Black. And on this sculpt here, he's got this kind of spine fin thing on his back, so I'm going to pick this out with some Abaddon Black as well. This will once again break up that green colour and add some interest to the model. And finally, with the Abaddon Black, I'm also going to pick out all of his toenails and his fingernails as well. I'm just picking these out with a layer of Abaddon Black. And with that Abaddon Black applied, that is his sword, spine, and nails picked out. So next thing I'm going to paint is the horn on his head. For this, I'm coming in with some Rhinox hide. I'm just going to paint this all over the horn sticking out of his head. Down the bottom, I'm picking out the points where it meets the skin, where there's a little bit of shade setting in the recess. I'm using that as the line between the horn and the skin. So this way it looks like the horn's bursting out through the skin on his head. I'm just applying a couple of layers of Rhinox hide all over the horn. And with the horn picked out, there's a lot of the details on the Plaguebearer already base coated. But the next step is I'm going to paint the eye on the model. So for this, I'm coming in with some Abaddon Black first. I'm going to sink this into the recess of his eye socket, being really careful around all the Death Guard green we've already painted, just sinking some Abaddon Black into his eye. And then with a little bit of white scar, I'm going to come in and paint a really thin horizontal line going through the middle of that black. And then finally, with some Abaddon Black again, I'm adding a small vertical line of Abaddon Black into the middle of the white scar. and this will act like a pupil. And with that eye picked out, that's really added some character to the model. The next I'm going to pick out is his teeth. For this I'm using some Rawk stone. I'm just going to carefully apply this over all of the teeth on the model. I want to be really careful around the Death Guard green again. We're just applying some Rawk stone onto his teeth to give him that rotten teeth appearance. Now with all of those base coats picked out, the next thing I'll do is apply a shade to the areas we paint with Bugman's Glow. For that I'm going to be using some Reichland Flesh shade. I'm just going to very carefully apply this over all of the areas we picked out with Bugman's Glow. So any of the sores, boils, warts, anything like that we applied a little bit of Bugman's Glow to earlier, I'm just applying a little bit of Reichland Flesh shade over all of these areas. So you want to be quite careful with this. Don't want it to pull too heavily into any of the recesses. We just want to add a little bit of definition to all of these areas, so we can come back through in a minute and really give them a painful, sore appearance. So just carefully work your way around. Apply a small bit of Reichland Flesh shade to all of the areas we applied a bit of Bugman's Glow.
If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below.
And after that Reichland Flesh shade has dried, you can see it's added definition to all of those areas we paint with Bugman's Glow. So now it's time to give these areas a painful appearance. So for this, I'm coming in with some Cadian Flesh Tone first. I'm going to have this quite thin on my brush. I'm going to apply it in the middle of all the areas that we applied to Bugman's Glow in the Reichland Flesh shade. So for all of these larger boils here, I'm picking them out with a thin layer of Cadian Flesh Tone. Having this nice and thin will help build up a transitional appearance from the darkest colours to the lightest colours. I'm also going to pick out some of the boils we painted on the rest of the body, just applying a little bit of Cadian Flesh Tone to the tops of these. You don't have to pick out every boil, leaving some of them darker will add some interest to the model. In any of the exposed bits of skin here, I'm applying a little bit Cadian Flesh Tone to any of the raised details, but leaving that Reichland Flesh shade showing in all of the recesses. And this is going to build up with some other colours to give us a really nice, sore, painful looking appearance to all of these parts of skin on the model. So just pick out some of the boils and apply a small spot of Cadian Flesh Tone on the top of them. And with that Cadian Flesh Tone applied, we picked out some of these boils on the model. We're starting to lighten them up. We're really giving them that sore appearance of painful wounds. So now with some Kislev flesh. And once again keeping this nice and thin. And I'm just going to apply this in the middle of where we applied the Cadian Flesh Tone in the previous step. So by keeping this nice and thin again, it's really going to help that transition from dark to light on all of these large boil areas. I'm also applying this in some of the smaller boils that we applied the Cadian Flesh Tone as well. Just applying a little bit of Kislev flesh to the top of those, as well as picking out any of these exposed areas of flesh poking through the skin. I'm just picking out some of the more raised parts with a thin layer of thinned down Kislev flesh. Once again, you don't have to pick out every boil that we did the previous step with. Having some tonal difference across the model really adds interest to our Plaguebearer. and with that Kislev flesh applied, it's really brightened up a load of those areas of exposed flesh and boils. Now there's just one final highlight to apply to these, and that's going to be with some deepkin flesh. Just got to apply a thin spot in the middle of all of the larger boils and on all of the raised points, really looking like an area of sore, painful flesh on all of these exposed areas. So just work your way around the model, pick out some of the larger boils and open sores, things like that, and apply just a little bit of deepkin flesh on all the most raised points to really give that impression of painful exposed flesh. And with that deepkin flesh applied, that is all of those boils and exposed muscle painted up on the Plaguebearer. So next thing I'm going to highlight are the nails. For this I'm coming in with some Dawnstone. I'm just going to apply thin line of Dawnstone at the very top, all of the nails on the feet and the hands of the Plaguebearer. Just keep these nice and thin. Just apply a small line of Dawnstone on the sharpest points. And with all the nails picked out, the model's really starting to come together now. There's only a couple of details left to paint on the Plaguebearer. The first one of those I'll do will be the sword. For this I'm coming in with some Thousand Suns blue. I'm going to paint this as kind of a chunky edge highlight on all the raised parts of his sword. By painting this blue, it's going to give us a really interesting effect all over this plague sword, really make it stand out, look quite unique, and give the impression of a sharp weapon made out of some kind of mysterious rock. Let's just apply a chunky edge highlight around all the raised areas with some Thousand Suns blue. And on his spine, I'm going to pick out all these raised parts here, and once again just applying a chunky edge highlight of Thousand Suns blue to all of the raised parts of his spine. With that Thousand Suns blue applied, you can see it's picked out all those areas of black, added some interest to them. So now I'm coming in with some Temple Guard blue. And for this I'm going to apply a really thin edge highlight within all of the areas that we just applied the Thousand Suns blue. So by applying this and allowing a little bit of the Thousand Suns blue to show through around the Temple Guard blue we're applying now, we get a really nice, interesting effect, almost giving an obsidian look to all of these areas, give us the impression of a really sharp sword in his hands. And I'm also applying the Temple Guard blue just at the very tips of all of the spines on his back, giving the same effect that we gave on the sword, tying the model together and also giving that really interesting appearance to the spine. After that Temple Guard blue has been applied to all the black areas, so it's given us a really nice, interesting effect to his spine and his sword. So now with some Mournfang brown, I'm going to come in and start highlighting up his horn. So for this, I'm picking a point on the model, leaving a little bit of Rhinox hide showing at the very bottom. I'm going to paint the rest of the horn with Mournfang brown. Trying to get a nice solid base coat, but leaving a little bit of Rhinox hide showing at the very bottom of the horn. And then with a small brush, I'm going to do some small lines at the very bottom where the Mournfang brown meets the Rhinox hide. And this will give the impression of growth between the two layers and add interest to this horn. And now with some Steel Legion drab, I'm going to repeat the process we just applied. Just picking a spot a little bit further up and painting the rest of the horn with Steel Legion drab. by doing this multiple times with slightly lighter colours, remembering to do those little lines between each of the two layers, you build up and add a really interesting effect of a horn growing and lightening up as it grows up the model. Once I'm applying these little scratchy lines at the bottom of the Steel Legion Drab, and now I'm coming in with some Carrot Stone, picking a point once again higher up on the horn, leaving some of the Steel Legion Drab showing through, applying some Carrot Stone, and then applying some of these little scratchy lines at the bottom of this Carrot Stone into the Steel Legion Drab. And now with some Ushabti Bone, I'm repeating the process once again, adding another growth line near the top of the horn this time, applying a solid coat of Ushabti Bone near the top, and then applying some scratchy lines on the layer where it meets the Carrot Stone, and finally with some Screaming Skull, I'm just going to apply some scratchy lines near the very top of the horn to give the impression of the final layer of growth. And with that Screaming Skull applied, you can see it's given the horn that really interesting transition from dark up to light, like a natural growth coming out of the Plaguebearer's head. And that is how to paint a Plaguebearer model for your games of Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40K. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know in the comments down below, are there any other demon models you would like to see me paint? Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy painting!